Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the BCS Podcast. 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump won the presidency in a clear victory over Kamala Harris, with the Republicans also securing majorities in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. As much as some people may not like it, politics affects all aspects of society, including sports. And so in this edition of the BCS Podcast, we're going to be looking at the effect that the second Trump administration could have on sports. Let's start by highlighting that all the major American sports leagues, and by that I mean Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, the National Basketball Association, the National Football League, and the National Hockey League, all have some form of social justice initiative. For example, the NBA is seen as very progressive, with a number of social justice initiatives, including the Environmental Action Group and its own social justice coalition under its NBA Cares banner. In recent years, the NBA has also forced Donald Sterling to sell his stake in the LA Clippers after it emerged that Sterling had made racist remarks about Magic Johnson, and recently both Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves and LaMelo Ball of the Charlotte Hornets have also been fined for making homophobic slurs. It should also be remembered that during the NBA bubble in 2020, the league took no action against the Milwaukee Bucks after they refused to leave their locker room to play their game against the Orlando Magic following the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The NFL has also recently had a voter registration campaign during the most recent elections. This was very much non-partisan. It was not vote red or vote blue. It was just very much encouraging fans to vote. It should be said that some people are not fans of the major American sports leagues having anything to do with social justice efforts. I asked a number of people to give me their view on how Trump's second term could affect efforts in this space. Here is what the co-founder and co-host of the baseball podcast, Ethan Perchersky, had to say on this issue. His views came to me in written form, and so they will be voiced by an AI voice generator.
Many fans, myself included, believe that the shift of leagues and athletes towards social advocacy have blurred the lines between innocent entertainment and agenda-driven propaganda. I believe that a majority of fans are in favor of keeping political and cultural stances out of sports. Specifically, what has bothered many fans about this is the perceived left-leaning bias in professional sports. For instance, San Francisco 49ers star Nick Bosa was fined $11,255 recently for wearing a Make America Great Again hat during a post-game segment. In a statement to the media, the NFL claimed that the hat violated rules prohibiting players from displaying or otherwise conveying personal messages either in writing or illustration, unless such message has been approved in advance by the league office. On the surface, that prohibition on personal messaging seems reasonable, as it theoretically disallows players from putting their personal views front and center. However, issues arise when the NFL approves certain controversial messages and prohibits others. In this case, Make America Great Again has been used as a campaign slogan by President Trump, and therefore is seen as right-leaning. However, after George Floyd's death in 2020, NFL teams placed signage in their stadiums and placed logos on the back of players' helmets reading Black Lives Matter, an equally controversial slogan in today's political atmosphere. The re-election of President Trump is seen by many to be a mandate given by the American people to push back against an increasingly more liberal culture that many conservatives feel has left them behind. When it comes to American sports, leagues will either start elevating conservative messaging as well, or try much harder to keep all politically charged messaging out of their products. If asked to make a prediction, I would posit that professional sports will allow the political messaging they once welcomed to slowly die down. Players will likely still choose to wear merchandise or give interviews supporting one side of the aisle over the other, but league-sanctioned ideological messaging will fade away. As an American who has held a lifelong love of our Big Four sports, I will be glad to see our entertainment products return to focusing more on the play on the field that made us fall in love with them to begin with, and leave divisiveness behind.
It will be very interesting then to see what happens on this issue. In particular, in 2 years' time, during the midterm elections, will Trump and his allies take issue with the fact that the NBA, which is seen as being very progressive and very liberal, will they take issue with the fact that the NBA will not schedule games on the day of those midterm elections to help encourage their fans to vote? Contrast that with the NFL, which is stereotypically seen as having a fandom that skews male and skews Republican. Are Trump and his allies going to take issue with the fact if they run another voter registration campaign, for example? Alternatively, is Ethan right, and will the major American sports leagues start to wind down their social justice efforts? One sports-based issue that was very prominent during this election was the issue of trans people participating in sports, mainly because of the Trump campaign and its backers buying multi-million dollars of ad spots for its ad on this issue, which it has to be said many found to be misleading, offensive and very transphobic. Therefore, many are wondering what Trump's attitude will be to Title IX, the legislation that ensures gender equality access to all educational programs, including sports programs. For more on this, let's hear from Long Island, New York resident and British expat, the now multi-time contributor to the BCS Podcast, Ross Worsley. His views on this came to me in written form and so will be voiced by an AI voice generator.
Trump has supported various initiatives to boost the visibility of American sports, including professional leagues and college athletics. His re-election could lead to more federal attention on issues like sports funding, Title IX enforcement, or infrastructure for professional sports leagues. Trump's administration had a mixed record on gender equity, with some policies that could impact women's sports. His re-election might result in a continuation of debates around Title IX. There may also be a focus on the participation of transgender athletes in women's sports, an issue Trump has voiced strong opinions on in the past. His stance on transgender athletes could influence state-level policies and impact women's sports.
It also has to be remembered that the FIFA Men's World Cup in 2026 and both the Olympics and Paralympics in 2028 will both take place in America during Trump's second term. All of these events attract a global audience, and so if Trump does in fact seek, quote, vengeance and, quote, retribution on what he considered the, quote, enemies within, including both journalists and politicians, these actions will only be magnified by the eyes of the world being on America at the time. It will not be surprising then if both FIFA and the International Olympic Committee release statements condemning any actions that could reasonably be seen as being undemocratic. Ross Worsley also sent me his view on this issue as well. Again, his words will be spoken by an AI voice generator.
Trump's foreign policy could affect how the U.S. interacts with international sports organizations and other countries. For instance, his America First approach might lead to tensions during the upcoming global sports events that are due to be hosted in the U.S. These include the Ryder Cup, World Cup, and Olympics. It will be interesting to see how he works with the nations participating in the events and how accommodating he is to their needs.
In recent research conducted by The Guardian, they found that nearly 90% of the total monetary value of all donations made by owners of teams in the 5 major American sports leagues during this most recent election cycle from November 2020 through to October 2024 were made to Republican campaigns. With this in mind, let's head over to California to hear from another multi-time contributor to the BCS podcast, David P. Darlington.
I believe that there will be an effect on sports, on the vast majority of sports, and frankly, those that involve men's sports as much. From what I understand, a significant majority of owners of professional sports, whether it be basketball or baseball, especially football and hockey, contributed heavily to the Trump campaign to get them elected. So I think what's going to happen is that as the Trump administration starts to exercise their policy against more, quote, liberal issues, I think you're going to see that owners of these teams are going to become a lot more stringent about the behavior of those athletes under contract with them. And I also think that anything that they may have supported in the past that may be considered liberal or socially fair, they will cut funding for that. So I'm not surprised. I sort of expected that this might happen. This is not only going to happen in sports; it's going to happen in a lot of companies as well. But I think what's going to be interesting is when the FIFA games go to Mexico in 2026, I believe, and the Olympics are coming here, the Summer Olympics, how that will impact both the Olympic committees, which they talk a lot about unification of humanity in the games in the United States. And I think that that's going to be a hard pill for Trump and his cronies to frankly swallow. And I think there'll be some backlash on that. So that said, I think there will be an impact, and it could be not super significant, but it will definitely be a visible sign of the times.
With all that being said, let's see how things play out over the next 4 years. On the issue of social justice campaigns and players airing their views, it does have to be said that views on this do seem to split along party lines, and at times these views can be very hypocritical. I'm thinking in particular of Laura Ingraham of Fox News' now infamous refrain to LeBron James and Kevin Durant to, quote, shut up and dribble when they aired their views on Donald Trump. While LeBron James and Kevin Durant's words may have been very coarse, they absolutely have every right to express those views as American citizens, regardless of if anyone else does not agree with them. It also has to be said that I do not recall Laura Ingraham since rebuking Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs at all when he recently made his views on how women should supposedly prioritize marriage and raising children over their careers in a recent commencement speech at a Catholic liberal arts college. Nor, it has to be said, did Ingraham have anything to say when Butker started his own political action committee during this most recent election focused on raising Christian values. Regardless of what Ingraham or what anyone else thinks about what LeBron, Durant or Butker has to say or their political views, all of them have the right to express what they want to express politically, regardless of what you, I or anyone else may think. On this issue of the major American sports leagues running social justice efforts, they absolutely should do that if they want. And anyone who values the tenets of democracy should take issue with Trump and his allies, or anyone else for that matter, trying to quiet those major American sports leagues in their social justice efforts. For now though, that brings an end to another edition of the BCS Podcast. As always, I thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye now. The BCS Podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Boris Anderoff and Pixabay for for the use of the music and sound effects in this podcast. This episode features contributions from David P. Darlington, Ethan Perchersky and Ross Worsley.